Welcome to the Richard Sherman Podcast. Hit that sub button if you're new. We're here to give you great NFL content, game recaps, player interviews, and stories from around the league. Please tune in. Welcome back to the Richard Sherman Podcast. Another unpredictable and wild week in the National Football League. Mitchell, what did you think?
Richard, my Lions weren't playing today, but your San Francisco 49ers were. And I didn't expect much of this game. San Francisco took it to them early. Let's start with San Francisco because their defense looked like San Francisco defense. Richard, I'm more curious about your thoughts here because the name of the game today was defense for the San Francisco 49ers. Your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, they played phenomenal. The pass rush was back, and you were getting it from everywhere. Malik Collins was putting pressure. He played a phenomenal game. He has been an impact player throughout the beginning of the season. He's been a great addition. Kevin Givens had his best game as a pro, 2.5 sacks. Nicholas John Bosa, all day, he was chomping at the bits. All day, he was just inches away from getting a sack, forced fumble on Jacoby Brissett. And finally, near the end of the game, he gets home, gets a sack, forced fumble, recovers the fumble. And you could see him looking up, Mitchell. You could see Nicholas John Bosa saying, thank God, finally, all this hard work is paying off because he was working. And it wasn't from lack of effort. He was working. Frederico, all-pro Fred Warner, another interception, a game-breaking play, scored. The offense got 2 trips into the red zone, stalled out both times, settled for field goals. But what does Frederico do? He says, you guys need points? Throw it to me, Jacoby, real quick. Throw it to me. Got it. Gets up, runs it in, dives in, pick 6. Has to be the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. There are people saying it should be TJ Watt, and I was one of those people. TJ Watt has kind of slowed down as the season has progressed. He only has 3 sacks on the season. He probably has 4 or 5 that have been negated by penalties, whether it's pass interference or holding or something else on somebody else on his team, but still having a phenomenal season. But Fred, right now, it's hard to beat. He has 1 sack, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, and a pick 6, along with a number of tackles and just being an overall menace every single week that a team has to game plan for. I think he gets the nod. Another really good game for Jawan Jennings, who was surprisingly the highest targeted guy on the football field after his huge performance last week versus the Rams in that loss. Had 6 targets today, 3 catches for 88 yards. Deebo Samuel, that big post got him on the board, 3 catches, 58 yards. Jordan Mason, man, another really productive day. Can't say enough about him. He deserves to be a starting running back in the league somewhere. It's just not going to be here when Christian McCaffrey comes back. They're kind of receiving good news, going to test it out next week and see what he can do. What I got to say about that, Mitchell, that's all. Everybody, patience is a virtue. All Niner fans, Niner faithful, patience is a virtue. Don't sit here and get all tight trying to figure out when Christian's coming back. Be patient. I guarantee you he's not trying to milk this. He's not trying to, oh man, I'm just here for the money. He's one of the hardest working players in the National Football League. If he can play, he will be out on that football field. If he's not on that football field, it's because he can't play right now. And the Achilles injury is one of those that is so touch and go every week. Coming from experience, I'm speaking from experience, both rupturing my Achilles and having the Achilles tendonitis on the other ankle with haggling deformity and all this other stuff, and having to go to specialists and get PRPs injected, cortisone shots injected into my heel because you can't put it in the tendon. You can't. It'll rupture your tendon. That's one thing you should know. Everybody's like, man, why can't you just put a shot? You cannot put a cortisone shot into the Achilles tendon. It'll rupture. It'll weaken it and rupture it. So there's not a lot of blood circulation there. So that's why you get PRP injections to help the healing process start and get some white blood cells in there, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes you go stem cell route. I'm not sure. I wasn't with Christian when he went to get these procedures. Those were just things I did. Got dry needling. You try everything. when I ruptured my Achilles, I was to the point, Mitchell, it was in so much pain, and they kept saying, "Oh, it won't rupture, it won't rupture." I was putting lidocaine patches and taping them around them so they would stay in the spot. And that's how I was playing through the season that year before it ruptured, because it was like, man, there's so much pain, but I'm just trying to get through these games and help my team win. And so,
Well, Richard, I want to stop right there because this is a story I think that needs to be told. I mean, you and I go way back. I mean, 10,
like
12 years now.
Cadillac.
Yeah, we go way, way, way back. And to deal with and to experience it on my side of the fence and know the pain you were going through, and knowing that essentially what you were told, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, was, hey, you can sit out, but you're going to have to sit out the bulk of the season, or you can play this thing out and eventually it's going to rupture. And Richard, when you went down in Arizona in that Thursday night football game, I knew. I mean, you were a warrior and walked off the field, but I knew darn well what happened, and I know you knew. I mean, it just goes to show you the guttiness that you played with as a professional. And Richard, you can speak from experience to these calf strains and Achilles tendonitis, any issue. This is a severe issue. So to rush Christian McCaffrey back right now, I mean, you're the better man to speak about it.
It's not.
It makes no sense right now.
It's not worth it. And they're playing it as correctly as they can. From the 49ers perspective, they're taking their time, allowing him to go get the treatments that he can get. Because no matter how tough you want to be, you got to be tougher than your brain. And you got to send signals to your brain that you're okay when your brain's telling you, hey, there's a flat tire. There's a flat tire. Hey, no matter what I do, my brain's telling me there's a flat tire. So even if I want to keep driving my car, hey, your tire's flat. You're just gonna keep hearing that do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do. And Christian McCaffrey is a high functioning athlete. You can't play at the speed. You can't play to the standard you want to play until that flat tire is fixed. And so he'll do everything he can, get back right. Hopefully he's back by November. I think that's the timeline they're putting on him. Every single one is different. So if you're hearing from an expert, oh, he can be back here or he won't be back till here, they don't know. They really don't know, because nobody knows but Christian McCaffrey and his body, because he may wake up tomorrow and feel really, really good and be able to do some sprints. And then he may wake up the next day, feel really, really good and be able to sprint again. And then the third day he may wake up and can barely walk. And that's just how crazy this injury and the flare-ups are. And so you have to manage it however you can manage it. And so you're going to hear, good things some days, and then you're going to hear things, maybe there's a setback. Don't be discouraged. When he can play, he will play. But this 49ers defense this week is our Uber Eats almost perfect defense. This segment is brought to you by Uber Eats, where we highlight the NFL defense that put on the week's most dominating performance, with the 6 sacks of Jacoby Brissett, the interception, Frederico's pick 6, the chaos brought on by that D-line, and Nicholas John Bosa's forced fumble and fumble recovery, and holding Jacoby Brissett relatively in check. I mean, he got beat up. He was limping off the field by the end of this game, Mitchell. He's going to sit in a hot tub and cold tub for a couple of days. This is not a game he will soon forget. And that's why the San Francisco 49ers are this week's Uber Eats almost perfect defense. Remember, you can order almost anything you want with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Next week, Mitchell, they got the Arizona Cardinals, who just got beat down by the Washington Commanders. I think that could be another game they could feel good about, but Kyler Murray in this chaos, I always hold my breath.
It's a division foe, my friend. TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you want to call a touchdown, one thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code Richard. That's code Richard for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5, and you get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Before we leave this game, let's talk a little bit about the offense. They got George Kittle back. Huge catch in the corner of the end zone. He just outjumped three defenders for that ball. He wanted it more. It's got to feel good for Brock Purdy to have him back. Richard, this game, I saw with Brock Purdy, statistically not the best game, 15 for 27, 288, a touchdown and interception, but goodness, he extends plays. I mean, he's so slippery in that pocket and evades, defenders. I mean, there was Jabril Peppers had a surefire sack on him all day. He slipped out of that. Richard, Brock Purdy impressed me today, despite his numbers not being the best, but it's got to feel good for him having George Kittle back, having Deebo Samuel back. And like you said, third and Juwan Jennings really took advantage of this offseason and these injuries early in the season. And he looks like another go-to guy. When they get Ricky Purcell back and Juwan Jennings going, I mean, and they get healthy, the 49ers are going to be the 49ers again. The faithful, you guys can rest assured, coming from a Detroit Lion fan, this team is here still. But, Richard, I got to correct you on one thing before we leave this game. You said the defensive player of the year front runner right now is Federico. Did you forget about my boy, Aiden Hutchinson, leading the league in sacks? Richard, he's going to show tomorrow night against your Seattle Seahawks who the real defensive player of the year is. We'll see. But that's Mitchell, I'm calling it right now.
I don't know how it'll look because we got a couple games to play, but it looks like Brock Purdy may be leading the league in yardage right now. And just some of the passes, because they're like, every time there's something new that they say about him. Mm-hmm. Every week is something new. It's like, well, he played great, but they lost. Or he just threw it to Debo and Ayuk, and then they had so much yak. But then he's second in the league in yards and has the least amount of yak in the league. And they're like, well, it's because Kyle Shanahan. It's like, well, I'm going to let you know something. When you got to work this hard, one way or the other, if you got to work this hard to prove a point about a player, like with Brock Purdy, I could just say, hey, he's number one in just about every measurable stat. I don't really have to work that hard. I can just go to stats, close my eyes, pick one, he's probably near the top. When you talk about that, and there's other quarterbacks, you got to sit there and say, he's a generational talent. And it's because of the offense. It's because the coach. It's because he doesn't have this. It's because somebody was injured. It's because over here. Well, he was born over here. He was born on the 23rd of January and not the 24th. If he was born on the 24th, he would have. I get it. Brock Purdy's elite. And he continues to play that way, and he continues to do it with other guys. So when Ricky Purcell comes back, it's just so many mouths to feed on this offense. So you forget about guys like George Kittle. He makes an incredible play over three guys. Like for that, he's an all-pro player. Like that's not really that surprising when it's him, because the quality of player he is. But he gets kind of lost in his offense. So sometimes, because you got Christian doing the work he has, and because Debo is making these plays, or BA is making these plays, or Juwan has the game he had last week, are you waiting for Ricky Purcell, the first-round pick, to suit up? There's so much talent and weapons on this offense. This offensive line has been much maligned outside of Trent Williams. Pooney has been phenomenal at the right guard position coming into the season. Colton McKivitz, less than desirable at times, played a solid game this week and deserves some credit for that. And when they don't play solid and when they don't hold up well, Brock Purdy does a great job avoiding those sacks. Hey, when they get beat early, Brock Purdy, hey, dances around, boom, boom, maneuvers, gets in the pocket. He does not get enough credit for that. I'm sure he gets credit from them and gets credit in that offensive line room and from Forrester, the offensive line coach, where he's like, hey, Brock, appreciate you. You're taking a lot of these plays or negative plays off my offensive line. Trent Williams deserves credit for playing through injury. I know sometimes fans get emotionally hijacked when players are demanding more money or sitting out or things like that. Try not to. Try your best not to. It's not just like when the team makes decisions. It's business. It's business. You gotta get the most while you can get it. He's at the top of his position at a really late stage in his career, trying to get as much as he can. I guarantee you this. There were times Trent Williams could have sat out and not played. And this was in the COVID year when we were in Arizona. And I'll never forget this. Trent was beat up. He was hurt. And he could barely walk. He could barely, he's in the training room every day. And he probably could have sat the season out and been fine. Like, we weren't really playing for anything. There's no real reason for you to go out there. But he's the kind of pro that says, hey, I don't care about the money. I don't care about that. I'm out there for my teammates. If I can go, if I'm healthy enough to step on that field, I'm going to go. So if he's healthy enough to go, I promise you he deserves the money he's getting. Please take your negative energy towards him away and throw it away somewhere, because one of the best players in football, and he was opening up colossal gaps this week for Jordan Mason to run through, and he's going to continue to protect Brock Purdy's blind side. You got to work through the kinks in the season. For him to come off the streets and start an NFL game at left tackle and play a relatively solid game. Obviously the standard for him is so high that it's impossible to live up to sometimes, but he is a generational, out of this world, insane player. There's not very many players that could come off their couch and no matter how hard you're working out and play an NFL game that week that counts and say, hey, he looks pretty good. Like, you'll take that every time, and they'll continue to get better. And I think I heard they're working Spencer Buford at right tackle, so they can just have more depth and just trust the process. You got to trust the process with these guys. Trust your quarterback. Brock Purdy's making good decisions, getting the ball out, knowing where the pressure is coming from. I think this team's going to be fine, and you got to celebrate the victories while they're there.
Richard, we got to take it to Houston. The Texans played one of your favorite teams in the NFL, one of your favorite quarterbacks in the NFL, and Trevor Lawrence, and he proved again that he is worthy of this colossal contract he signed this offseason. Richard, the Jacksonville Jaguars are off to a remarkable start this year at 0-4. Richard, Houston wins late. The Texans are 3-1 now. You talk to me about the Texans, because they needed this win bad, and it came down to the wire. A division foe in the Jags. Talk to me, my friend.
Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars battle, it was one of their better games this season, both offensively and defensively. They were finding a way to get stops. They led for a good portion of this game. I gotta check my notes, Mitchell, because some of these fans are so hard on us because they don't understand how tough it is to watch freaking 6 games at the same time and try to take notes and try to watch this one and try to watch this one and think you may not miss something. You're not watching this game because you didn't see everything that happened to my team. Easy. You're on 3rd Street. We're watching. It's just tough to keep up with every dang play. We're talking about the Jacksonville game. Yes. Trevor Lawrence played really good. Tank Bigsby played a really good game running the football. Had more yards than Travis Etienne. And their rushing attack, that's always the best friend of a quarterback, a good running attack. And Travis Etienne played a really solid game. But Brian Thomas getting involved, getting that red zone touchdown off the muff punt. But Trevor Lawrence, again, played a game manager style game. And again, gets credit for being a generational talent, but only really needs to manage the game. And I think once we get to the point in the NFL where the owners and GMs understand you only need a game manager, and most of these quarterbacks are only that. I talked to a GM that said, hey, we're taking guys in the top 5 right now that wouldn't have gotten a 2nd round grade just because the quality of player has dropped so tremendously. And I think that's something we got to recognize, that we want every draft class to have a generational guy, a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady, a Patrick Mahomes. That's not necessarily true. Like, accept the guys for what they do when they're playing. Stop. We got to stop labeling them pre-snap and allow them to play and then label them. Because once they play, you see what they're going to be. Now, some guys you're like, hey, I can see the potential there. Maybe if we get them in a different system, maybe they need time to develop, i.e. Geno Smith, i.e. Sam Darnold right now in Minnesota. Maybe he needs to be put in a better situation, i.e. Justin Fields right now, finally taking the steps that are necessary. They lost today in Indianapolis, but I think that was more of a show of that defense kind of taking a step back and having a rough game than the offense. That defense has been all world the first 3 wins, and the offense hasn't been giving them much. And then CJ decides in the second half of this game to play a phenomenal game. But back to where we started, Trevor Lawrence has lost 9 straight. And not that all wins and losses, they give quarterbacks credit for them. So it's not a quarterback stat, but it's quarterback stat. Because if he wins the games, they say Trevor Lawrence has won 9 straight. You lose the games, they're going to say you lost 9 straight. And he's not playing bad football. He didn't play a bad game. He didn't turn the ball over. He gave his team a chance. He had 2 touchdown passes, even though one of them was just a little short pass to Brian Thomas. See, I knew when they called him Brian Robinson multiple times in the broadcast.
They
now
did.
they got it in my head that it's Brian Robinson. But they didn't do enough. And this is a division game. You're 0-4 to start the season. You start to consider like what's going so wrong because there are very few 0-4 teams that make the playoffs. Your defense isn't necessarily playing well enough. Even though at times they stood up, they gave up a late drive, obviously the game-winning drive to Houston at the end, the touchdown to Agumbawale. I knew I would butcher that too. But CJ Stroud threw for 345 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nico Collins continues to lead the league in receiving yards, a career high 112 receptions for 151 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had a really cool play where they ran a reverse. Looks like it was supposed to be a pass, but he didn't see the look that he wanted to see. Cut it up the middle, easy touchdown, or he saw the look that he wanted to see, and the look that he wanted to see was me. Hey, this one's mine. Y'all not throwing me enough, so y'all put it in my hands. I'm going to get it in the end zone. And this team is going to be a tough team to beat. You know, they stumbled a little bit last week, but this is a team we expected to see. They fought through adversity, but Jacksonville is going to have to look at the man in the mirror, figure out what the problem is, because it's so disappointing to have a solid game like this and then come up short. They just didn't make enough plays. And again, when you're making $55 million, the microscope is on you, and it's fair or unfair for you to elevate your team to victory. And they're expecting that from not only you, but the other quarterbacks. They expect that from Joe Burrow. They expect that from Josh Allen. They expect it from Patrick Mahomes. They expect it from Dak Prescott. So this isn't just a Trevor Lawrence thing. The criticism is the same. You start to make that top 5, top 3 quarterback money, you have to give that top 5, top 3 quarterback play, or else we need to stop paying these quarterbacks like this that we know aren't elevating their teams just because we're afraid of what the alternative is. Because if the alternative is you take a couple years with Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew or Derek Carr or whoever the case may be, where you feel like they're not necessarily a generation but a bridge quarterback, then you do it. Because sometimes those quarterbacks give you a better chance. That's why you got guys like they're thinking about benching Daniel Jones, or did they do it officially? Because you say, hey, there's other quarterbacks that can get us solid play. They can hit the plays, because there are a couple plays in that game where the Giants missed wide open guys, game-changing plays. There were 2 or 3 passes where it was like, hey, this is a free play. Just put the ball on him and let's get down the field, and we got a huge play. Malik Neighbors makes it pretty easy for you to just put it on him. He's open. And you're missing him. You just need competent NFL play, and we're not getting that. He's not playing at a high enough level that his team needs, and that's the problem right now in Jacksonville. Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime Video. It's the best season yet, packed with big rivalries and even bigger stars. Join Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit, and Kaylee Hartung every week for the games you can't miss. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern with football's best party, TNF Tonight. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial and you can cancel at any time. It's Thursday Night Football and it's on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Richard, you want to talk about a guy that got paid in the offseason and elevated his game, unlike Trevor Lawrence? Nico Collins, as you mentioned. This guy, talk about a rare combination. The Ohio State Buckeye, C.J. Stroud throwing to the U of M Wolverine, Nico Collins, forming arguably one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the league right now. Richard, shout out to Nico Collins. You got to love to see it with a guy like this. Frankly, at U of M, they ran the ball. I mean, everyone knows they run the ball, and to see him excel so much in the NFL, the Texans got a steal in Nico Collins. Richard, let's take it to LA. The Chargers gave the Kansas City Chiefs a problem early, and frankly, it looked like they were going to win this game, and they just couldn't get things going in the second half, and Mahomes just did his Mahomes thing. But before we get into the game, there was a huge injury that occurred early in this game. Mahomes hitting, after throwing the pick, hitting a friendly fire on his own best wide receiver one, Rashee Rice, carted off the field, and Andy Reid says it does not look good. Richard, if he's out for a large amount of time, I mean, we've seen Mahomes do it in the past. He elevates the guys around him, but how much can they withstand without Rashee Rice?
They can withstand it. I have no doubt about it. It's just so unfortunate. You hate to see that play, especially unnecessarily. And I think, and obviously, it's nobody's fault. Patrick throws the interception, a bit overthrown for Travis Kelce. They find a way to strip it and get the ball on the ground. Everybody's just hustling. Football's a hard sport. Accidents happen. You just hate to see it, like, in a play like that. I'm sure Patrick is sick about it because he obviously never meant to do that. We wish nothing but the best for Rashee Rice and his health. Hopefully, he's able to bounce back and he's not out too long. Obviously, Andy Reid said it's not looking great. But even then, sometimes you don't know. There's a lot of tests they have to do. Sometimes miraculous things happen. They miss things, and guys aren't hurt as bad as you initially think sometimes, and sometimes it's a little bit worse. So we'll see when they decide it. But this is the kind of game that the Chiefs are mastering right now. We just talked to Trey McDuffie about the culture of this team, and when the game is close and the chips are down and everything's going wrong, and guys are getting tight on the other side, and you're like, man, are we going to lose? Are guys making mistakes? You're like, they're pretty calm. They're having fun. Chris Jones is cracking jokes, and of course, Chris Jones is making huge plays down the stretch to win his team the ball game, as he always has. I never want to hear any Chris Jones slander from anybody, really, because for this team, he's been elite, and I don't think no matter how much he's getting paid, it's underpaid for what he's doing for this team, not only in the regular season but in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. When a guy is helping you get rings, I guarantee you teams that are paying their guys $35-40 million, or nobody's paying them $40 million, but $35-33 million, and they aren't getting rings, or sitting there like, man, I'd pay him whatever he wants to get us a ring. But they're going to be able to weather it because Andy Reid is a great coordinator, a great play caller. Patrick Mahomes, after Tyreek Hill left, has shown that it does not matter. He is the engine, and you may have different wheels, you may have different a different radiator, a different air conditioning unit, a different steering wheel, different seats, leather upholstery, but as long as the engine's the same, Mitchell, the car will win the race. This team will get over the finish line. They're finding ways to win ugly, the grimy, grinded out games. And that's a good sign for a championship team. I know some people are like, oh man, they could be easily 0-4 or 1-3. If was a fifth, Mitchell, and you can't think about that. We all be drunk. And Travis Kelce had a nice game, 7 for 89 yards. starting to warm up. Kareem Hunt back in the fold, 14 carries for 69 yards. These are all good signs, and it always comes back to like, hey, they can just plug and play guys. They get guys, hey, we'll bring him back. We'll bring him back. Hey, what about McCole Hardman? Just let's bring him back in the playoffs, and he's going to make an impact for. Hey, didn't we have a guy that played? Where's Juju? Is Juju playing somewhere? Hey, didn't he play good for us? Let's bring him back. Hey, Kareem Hunt. Hey, we're beat up at running back. Hey, Kareem, you all right? You still in shape? You know we love you over here. Come over here. And again, as long as the engine's there, it seems like they're infallible, Mitchell. And he's going to continue to do it. And Justin Herbert played a solid game. You got to give him credit for being the Iron Man that he was trying to be, playing through a sprained ankle, toughing it out, but his mobility wasn't there. It led to a couple of sacks. You could tell he wasn't moving like he wanted to. J.K. Dobbins wasn't able to have the kind of rushing game he was having previously defensively. But Dupree had two sacks and 2 TFLs and a quarterback hit, but that it just wasn't enough. And you knew that Harbaugh and Greg Roman would force Kansas City to have these kind of games where it's just going to be a grind. We're going to run the ball, the clock. We're going to run the clock. It's going to be a low scoring, grinded out last drive game. That's everything that Jim Harbaugh has been for a long time, especially his first season with a team. They're going to have a chance at the end for the most part. And unfortunately, you're playing against Patrick Mahomes. He's going to find a way to get it done. Does Patrick Mahomes have an interception issue right now? No. I mean, is he throwing them? Yes. Is he throwing them? But when you really think about it, it becomes an issue when it's losing. If you're losing, he could throw for a bunch of touchdowns and they're losing games, and you'd be like, oh man, he's not doing enough. So I don't think it's an issue because he's a risk-taking quarterback. He makes throws and makes decisions other quarterbacks couldn't even fathom to make. And so you're going to have mistakes here and there. That was an overthrow that he threw. Luckily, one of his offensive linemen strips the ball from the defender and they get it right back. So it didn't even end up affecting the game in a negative way. He has continued to do that, but they've won. So maybe for other players, like he's in a different category of criticism as well, Mitchell. You got to put Mahomes in a different category for praise and criticism and everything. And he's earned that. He's earned that by winning and winning in the playoffs, winning it when it matters against every single quarterback we name, the elite. We outside of Burrow, I think he's been beat by Burrow, but Burrow hasn't been in the playoffs. So we don't get to have that conversation as of late. But he's beat Lamar, he's beat Josh Allen, he beat Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl. What do we say? He beat Tua Tagovailoa in Kansas City. So when it comes to criticism of Patrick Mahomes, he gets more grace. He's earned grace, not because, oh man, he's hyped up and he's hyped this, because he's earned the grace. Winning earns you grace, and you don't win, you don't earn grace. So no, the turnovers aren't a problem right now. He deserves grace. He earned the grace. As long as his team's winning, if they're losing, even then, what you gonna say? What you gonna say about it?
You're not going to say much. I mean, like you said, Patrick Mahomes is his engine. He might have got his Pirelli tires back under him this week with Travis Kelce, Richard. I mean, everyone was concerned. We asked the question to you last week. Is this the end of Travis Kelce? I mean, he did nothing the first 3 weeks. And sure enough, it's not the end. 7 catches for 89 yards. Is it safe to say Travis Kelce is back?
Yeah, I guess it's safe to say he's back. He never left. They're undefeated. And I don't think he cares if he has 10 yards or 150 yards, as long as they're winning. In this game, they needed him to step up more, obviously, with Rashee Rice out. But if Travis Kelce's the Pirellis, then Xavier Worthy has to be the nitrous, because he's injecting that kind of nitrous into this offense. They hadn't scored a touchdown in the first half. And I want to say it might have been 2 plays before the touchdown. The broadcast had just said, oh, man, Patrick Mahomes has only been held scoreless once in his Hall of Fame career. And then you look up and bomb, Xavier Worthy, touchdown. And they're like, yeah, that's why you better be careful, because he has another weapon where things can turn around quick. These last few years, they've had to walk the ball down the field. They've had to be conservative. intermediate passing. Defense is running too high, keeping the ball in front of him. But now he has Xavier Worthy. So when you sit there and you say, "Hey, we're gonna sit on these routes. We're gonna guard Patrick Mahomes," you bet not. You better watch when one is, because this can end quickly and very bad. And that ended up being a deciding factor in the game. Obviously, when they only score 17 points and 7 of them come on an explosive bomb to Xavier Worthy. So Chiefs fans have very little to worry about. They have a game in New Orleans on Monday Night Football. That'll be an interesting game. New Orleans coming off a tough loss to the Atlanta Falcons. We'll see how they respond.
First, let's take it to New York. The Jets had an easy one at home against the Denver Broncos, or so we thought. The Broncos come out victorious this one, 10-9, in a kind of a nasty game. Heavy rain throughout. Aaron Rodgers beat up 14 times. He was hit, 5 sacks. He's limping around all game. Richard, are you concerned at all about Aaron Rodgers right now? Because this is not a loss. I know he's not happy taking any losses, but when you take a loss to the Denver Broncos, I can't imagine he's thrilled at all.
I mean, it was a heavy rain game, Mitchell. It was a very heavy rain game. The weather was awful. It was pouring, which was in favor of the Denver Broncos. You got a young quarterback. You got a really good running back in Javonte Williams that they feel real good about. He's finally starting to get to his pre-knee injury form. And you're not taking a lot of shots with Bo Nix in the first place. A guy like Aaron Rodgers, who likes to adjust and throw quick passes and audible and move the ball that way, it has much more of an impact on his game. Both defenses played extraordinary, obviously assisted by the weather in some regards, but man, you got to give the Denver defense a lot of credit for what they were able to do, because they were putting pressure. They hit Aaron Rodgers 14 times. And if you know Aaron Rodgers and you played against him, he does not get hit that often. Even when protection is bad, he's usually getting the ball out. He understands where the pressure is coming from. He adjusts his protection. And I think there were obviously some mistakes made by the offensive line, maybe by the backs a few times, where guys came free where he thought he had somebody accounted for. He had at least a chip or to slow him down. He got blindsided a few times. He was limping at times. Even on the scrambles, we watched him a few weeks ago where he looked really good scrambling around, moving around, where you're like, hey, that's kind of the Aaron Rodgers of old. Obviously, he's 40 years old, so you expect there to be some decline. But today, it looked like there were issues in his lower body, perhaps, that on top of the hits he was taking, I mean, you just don't want to see it. And that offensive line has to do a better job. Obviously, Denver had a plan to attack them in every way and make sure they didn't have time to get the ball off, especially in this weather game where the ball is slipping out of the quarterback's hands. But there wasn't a lot of production from the Denver offense. They did just enough to win the game. They leaned on their defense, and their defense gave them everything they needed. This is the first time an Aaron Rodgers led team had 0 touchdowns at home, and it's some weather, but he's played in bad weather before, and it just didn't work for him this time. Some of it was bad luck, but to get sacked 5 times, it's tough. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett versus Sean Payton was the storyline in this game, and Sean Payton gets his revenge of sorts, but a 10-9 game, I mean, just not a great game offensively either side. I'm sure Aaron, everybody saw the last picture of him just like, oh, like, woe was me, after Greg Zuerlein missed the potential game-winning field goal. And again, under ideal conditions, you expect Zuerlein to hit that and the Jets to walk off with a win. It's not like they didn't have a chance to win. Let's not get out of hand. They had a chance, a field goal to win the game. He obviously misses it, and the storyline is what it is, but it still was a sloppy game. This is the first time in the history of the National Football League, at least in the Super Bowl era, a quarterback averaged 2.5 yards an attempt and won the game. So it just goes to show you what kind of game it was.
Let's talk about Bo Nix's stats. He went 12 of 25 for 60 yards and a touchdown. Richard, Cortland Sutton caught all 60 yards of his passing yards. 3 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown for Cortland Sutton. The rest of the 9 receptions amounted a grand total of 0 yards. Richard, this segment is brought to you by our friends and partners over at Ovation. This is the Ovation of the Day segment sponsored by Ovation for Men. This week's Ovation is for Patrick Surtain. So I know you're a huge fan of him. I mean, he do we do it? He's strapped up.
Mitchell.
He big strapped up Garrett Wilson. Any of the fantasy football owners that had Garrett Wilson today, you knew going in it was going to be a nasty day with the weather and all that stuff. But when you're dealing with Patrick Surtain on the other side of the ball, good luck. I know you have a ton of respect for him. And every guy we bring on the podcast, it always starts, who's your top cornerback in the league? It's him, Rich. I mean, talk about his performance today.
Patrick Surtain, you can talk about his performance every week. He's the number 1 corner in the National Football League, and it's clear and abundant. We could talk about 2, 3 through 4, 2 through 5. After that, there's a number of guys there. Tariq Woolen's playing really well. Whatever you want to say about him. Sauce Gardner's there. Stingley out in Houston is an elite guy. I'm not trying to leave anybody out. But there's a lot of guys that are playing good football. But you talk about a technique standpoint, a guy that never panicked, whether it's press or off, technique is always sound. You literally can pick any clip, any game, and it's teach tape. There's very few guys you could say that about. Patrick Surtain is an elite, all-pro. You always want guys to get the ball more and intercept it. And you say, hey, man, the best corner, and I'm a guy who says that, the best corners intercept the football. Whether he's intercepted it or not, if you in your fantasy league have a receiver that's going against Patrick Surtain, sit him. I don't care who he is. Sit him. Because him in combination with Vance Joseph and the pressure that this defense is bringing is causing a lot of people problems. And it's not because they're not good players, not great players. It's because he's a freaking technician. He is what you draw up. Create a player on your My Player, your career mode and NCAA 25, and you're talking about corner, design Patrick Surtain, and you got a guy. He's one of the best in the National Football League, and he deserves to be our Ovation player of the game for obvious reasons.
Richard, Ovation for Men celebrates the style, creativity, and excellence of deserving men. It's not just a fragrance, it's a statement. Available exclusively at Amazon. Click the link below in the description to redeem a first-time buyer coupon for a 15% discount. Richard, I know Ovation is your go-to fragrance on game day. We're happy to have them partnering with the podcast. You guys, if you want to go to cologne, Ovation is your choice. Check them out. Let's take it to Tampa Bay. This is a hot team. They're 3-1. They beat my Detroit Lions in Ford Field. I'm still a little beat up about it, but whatever. We'll take care of Seattle tomorrow, and I'll be on the up and up. But Tampa Bay got it done against Philly, and Philly's beat up right now. They're dealing with that, no Lane Johnson, no A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith got absolutely smoked last week. Hopefully he's okay. This team was beat up coming to this game, and Tampa Bay took care of them. Your thoughts on Tampa Bay? But before we get to the game, I want to talk about some comments that Baker made prior to this game. I mean, you played with Tom Brady for a little bit, your last season in the league. Baker said that everyone was stressed out with Tom, and it was his job to bring back the joy of football. Tom Brady's response, stressful was not having Super Bowl rings. Richard, your thought on this exchange here?
Well, both of them spoke facts. It's perspective. Everything's perspective. Baker's playing some really good football right now, and he's a different kind of leader than Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a really fun guy. He's not some dictator in the locker room, but he is a guy that holds everybody to a high standard and holds his receivers to a high standard, his offensive line, his coaches, his offensive coordinator, his training staff, everybody in the building. And sure, that's going to be stressful, but he's giving you that kind of performance. He's giving you that kind of effort where you got to deal with a little bit of stressful. He brought a ring to Tampa Bay when at a time, they didn't have a lot of hope. I don't think their fan base, I don't think their players necessarily thought that they had the team to win a Super Bowl when he was able to run through the playoffs as a wild card team, go to different stadiums and win. They beat Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game, and then played a really tough Super Bowl game where they against Patrick Mahomes. And so, and that defense played really good, but a bunch of young players, a bunch of guys who hadn't had a lot of playoff success played at a high level. And that's not because of Tom Brady. They stepped up and elevated in the moment. Antoine Winfield Jr., everybody remembers the Tyreek Hill, the two fingers. But he's not wrong. Like Baker, if you walked into the building and everybody was stressed, but they got rings on their fingers, maybe it wasn't. Maybe the stress is what they need. Maybe that's the kick in the butt they need, because that pushed them to where they needed to go. Because the difference between a Super Bowl championship team and just a good team is inches, Mitchell. It's details. It's attention to detail. And Tom was incredible at those things. He made sure. I mean, when you talk about getting done with a football game, you fly back the next night or the same night. You get on the bus right after the game, you drive to the airport, you get on the plane. That night, Tom Brady has his computer with all the games for the team we're going to play loaded, everything he wants, all his notes, and he's sitting there game planning for the next week. He's not waiting a moment, Mitchell. He's not. So if he's holding everybody else to that standard, he's holding himself to an even higher standard. So I'm not mad either way. Both of them are right. But Tom has 7 rings, and he's saying, I got 7 for a reason, Baker. You want to get one? Maybe fun is not the right word we want to use right now. Even though you're having fun and you're doing a great job with this offense, had a heck of a game. Let's not take anything away from Baker Mayfield. He's 30 of 47, 347, 2 touchdowns, and he ran one in. He looks like he's having a good time. He looks like he's a great fit in Tampa Bay. But if nobody has more fun if you ain't getting a ring. You get put out in the playoffs or you go home after the first round, I guarantee you look in that locker room and nobody's going to be having fun.
Richard, prior to this game, C.J. Gardner-Johnson put a little bulletin board material out there saying, I'm putting belt to ass. Safe to say that did not happen for the Philadelphia Eagles. When CJ was in Detroit, he was known for this kind of smack talking. And, frankly, it kind of wore fans thin without that production to back it. And I know he's earned a name for himself in Philly, and obviously he had a great career before that with the Saints. But Richard, having a teammate that vocalizes something like this pregame, like what is your thoughts? Like, is that something you're just saying, hey, just shh, or do you welcome that?
It depends. Everybody's different, and I don't think we have many times where we said anything pregame because it's not worth it. But usually, I mean, you feel good about it. You feel good as a team. You're not scared. You don't play this game if you don't have the confidence and to bow up and say, yeah, we're about that. We're about what he said we're about. It's not like he guaranteed a win or he said, hey, we're about to blow him out. I think they knew it was a dogfight, but he showed confidence in himself and his teammates. But for some guys, I guarantee you it rubbed them the wrong way. For some, guys who don't speak a lot, who let their plays speak, I'm sure it rubbed them the wrong way. And especially when you go into that game and you lose in the way they lost, in the fashion in which they lost, then internally there becomes a little bit of discord, whether it's offense versus defense, whether it's other guys on the defense who are playing at a high level who are just like, bro, that's enough. You're a playmaker in this league, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson has made plays during his time in this league and deserves credit. Let's not sit here and act like he's some kind of bum or something. He's not. He's a guy who's made plays. He's missed some tackles this year, and people have gone overboard trying to criticize him just because he's a guy who talks a lot. But you got to back things like that up. If you say that and lose, then your word starts to count for less. Then it's, hey, The next time you say something, it's kind of falling on deaf ears, or you might see some other players like, hey, bro, shut up, man. That's enough. Like, hey, you're doing too much. Or the head coach might say, hey, CJ, let's stay out of the media this week because we need to get back on track. We were coming off a win. Sure, you feel good. But when we lose a game in the way we lost, it wasn't as close as the score looks. Obviously, Keely Ringo returned the 2-point conversion, 70 yards. Good friend of mine. Full play, but this game wasn't even this close. Jalen Hurts had one of his worst games of the season. And without your two top weapons, any quarterback without the two top receivers that you expected to have when you start the season, I don't care which team it is, you're going to struggle, except maybe Patrick Mahomes, because it doesn't seem to matter for him. Or Josh Allen right now. Josh Allen is everybody eats, putting the ball wherever the open guy, wherever the offense, wherever the rhythm takes him, that's where he's putting it. But right now, Hurts has had 27 turnovers in 22 games. That's an issue. And I know we just talked about Patrick Mahomes and hey, it's not an issue, but it's only an issue when you start to lose. And again, Patrick Mahomes is in a different category of criticism than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has to be able to play better. This offensive line is so banged up right now. They used to be obviously one of the best offensive lines in football, and it was non-negotiable, it was non-debatable. You could not debate that. When they had Jason Kelsey, they had Lane Johnson, they have all these guys that you're like Landon Dickerson. You got guys where you feel good that, they're going to bulldoze people similar to your Detroit Lions and the offensive line they put together with Ragnow and Decker and Panay Sewell. But they're banged up right now, and he's getting more pressure than he has in the past. Levante David had a sack force fumble in this game, 2 sacks. Vita Vea had a sack, and they ran into situations where they were goal to goal, ran the ball, and Vita Vea and his defensive line just said no. Hey, no. No, again and again and again. And even the tush push, they got a touchdown off of it. But again, it's not as consistent as it once was when they had Jason Kelsey and he was getting that push, and it was almost automatic. It's not as automatic as it once was. And you're just not seeing the same consistency from this team. Saquon Barkley has been awesome. He's been awesome. He's been everything I think they would have expected him to be. And I think, for a lot of it, he won that game last week against New Orleans. Obviously there was some yardage thrown by Jalen Hurts, but without that big play by Saquon Barkley, I don't think they win that game. And you're just not seeing them put up the points they have in the past. And you wonder what it is. The new OC defensively, they're giving up points. Have they just not caught on to Vic's scheme? Because last week they were able to hold the Saints down. This week they give up 33 points. And so something has to give. Something has to give. It's unacceptable to only score 16 points and to give up 33 points. This is a really talented team, and they got to figure out what's wrong. Now, give credit to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Todd Bowles. This team has played together for a long time. They have the pieces, 2 elite receivers in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and they're going to give teams problems. Mike Evans got another touchdown, 8 catches for 94 yards. Chris Godwin caught a number of crucial third downs throughout the game. And then defensively, Vita Vea, Levante David. Those are still names you need to know. Those are still names that will have impact every single time, and they're doing it again. Todd Bowles is going to give you a tough scheme to deal with. Mike Evans became the Bucs' all-time leading scorer, so congratulations to him, passing Martin Gramatica. That's incredible. Congratulations, Mike. The Eagles have a bye. The Bucs are with us this Thursday at 7 p.m. on Prime Video. We'll be in Atlanta to see if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield can continue this hot streak in Atlanta.
And Richard, shout out to Baker Mayfield. He's this week's player in prime time, brought to you by our friends and partners over at Breitling. Baker Mayfield went off 30 for 47, 347 yards, 2 touchdowns. And like you said, he got Mike Evans involved early and often. Baker Mayfield, I don't think a whole lot of folks saw this coming. I mean, he had his moments in Cleveland. He was cast away. Some argued it, they went in favor of Deshaun Watson. Then he goes to the Rams and has his moments of flair, bringing them back against the Raiders a couple years back. And then he goes to the Bucs and turns his career around. And like you said, it's about the right situation for some of these quarterbacks. It seems that Baker Mayfield has found his right situation, and now he's our honoree for Players in Primetime, brought to you by Breitling. Richard, I'm going to be rocking my Breitling tomorrow on Monday Night Football, showcasing this bad boy as I go to Ford Field, to take on the Seattle Seahawks. We got to thank you viewers, though. I mean, the fact that we have these partners, like Breitling, like Uber Eats, like Ovation, this goes to show, the hard work that Richard's put into this. And we really, really appreciate all of you guys tuning in from across the country. Shout out to Baker Mayfield, Breitling's Player in Primetime. Richard, let's take it to Green Bay. Minnesota stays hot. I don't think anyone saw this team being this good coming into the season. They wrote them off in the NFC North. I think a lot of folks thought the Bears were going to take over them, no problem. But now we have Sam Darnold. I mean, Sam Darnold goes crazy in the first half. He now says the fourth highest odds on DraftKings to win the MVP at plus 1,500. He's tied with Lamar Jackson. This is relatively unheard of, Rich. The Minnesota Vikings pull off a stunner on the road against the Packers. Your thoughts on this game?
Well, first off, I'm going to double down on what you said. We appreciate you fans, even the ones who don't agree with everything I'm saying, and think I'm crazy and absolutely totally offbeat, and then put in the comments. I accept all criticism, baby. I appreciate you either way. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate you subscribing and watching us. We try to give you the best content, honest opinion, accurate info. Every now and then we may slip up and say the wrong thing. We apologize, and we try to correct it when we can, but we appreciate you. Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings are an incredible story, Mitchell. You talk about a surprise. You talk about out of left field, and maybe not for the Minnesota Vikings fans, but for me, the way they're winning, and this became a lot closer and a lot more of a barn burner than I'm sure they wanted it to be late in this game. Jordan Love struggled early on, was able to find a little bit of a rhythm late, get some yards. He threw up some 50-50 balls that his receivers were able to come up with. Some they weren't. And Byron Murphy gave up a touchdown, then also got an interception on the 50-50 ball, got a forced fumble. But you talk about guys like showing up. Kamo Grudger Hill with the interception. Shaq Griffin, the old Seattle Seahawk, had an interception off a tip pass or through the receiver's hands, whichever way you want to put it. But they're just playing with so much confidence. And Brian Flores has put a lot of pressure on teams with his scheme. Every week you hear another quarterback talking about how tough his scheme is to deal with. He's made some adjustments. He's got the right personnel, the right people in the right places. But Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell are a match made in heaven. And we said this earlier in the year. Sometimes it takes a little second to develop. It takes a second to get in the right scheme and the right place. And Kevin O'Connell did a great job articulating that point, that sometimes it's not the players failing the organization. It's the organizations that are failing these players. They don't have the right guys in place to develop, because these same players can be productive other places. So that means it's not the player. Maybe you're not doing enough to play into his strengths or understand his strengths and designing a scheme that allows him to flourish in that way. And I don't think we talk about that enough, both offensively and defensively. We talk about these top picks being busts, sometimes at the cornerback position, sometimes D lineman. Offensively, quarterback is obviously a big one, but in the wrong scheme, everybody can look bad. If you're sitting there and you're a man corner and you're in a zone scheme, and they're like, man, he's getting cooked. Well, maybe his IQ is different. Maybe he's a what do they call him? Oh, it's cat coverage. They call it cat coverage because you'd be like, I got that cat, you got that cat. I got that cat, you got that cat. And some guys are better in that. Like, hey, I just need a guy to study that I can follow all week. I don't want to understand route concepts. I don't want to understand combinations. I don't want to understand all that. Give me the guy I have, and I'll stop him from catching the ball. I was a different kind of guy than that. I want the whole scheme. I want the whole picture. I'm sometimes going to steal a route that has nothing to do with me and intercept it for the game. And everybody's different, but you have to understand who you're recruiting, who you're drafting, and be able to design your scheme if you're a good enough coordinator to fit your personnel and your personnel to fit your scheme. And Sam Darnold is the perfect example. 11 touchdowns on the season, leading the National Football League. Coming from Kyle Shanahan's system where he backed up Brock Purdy and got a few opportunities to showcase his talent a little bit, but not a ton. But he showed a massive development, a massive step forward from what he was dealing with when he was with the New York Jets when he got drafted. It just was not the right situation, the right fit, the right offense, the right scheme, the right personnel, and he didn't succeed. Mitchell, people were calling him a bust. And now if you go back in time and you erased all that and you said, hey, Sam Darnold was a top pick and he's leading the league in touchdowns, you say, obviously. They thought he was a top pick. They thought the talent was there. They saw what people saw at USC. But now he has the supporting cast and Justin Jefferson. Addison had a really good game, a really good curl and go route for a touchdown where he dropped a dime on him. He has a supporting defense. Just like a young game. He has a run game in Aaron Jones, who had a fantastic revenge game against the Green Bay Packers, who I don't think should have ever let him walk. Not for that price. It does stuff like that I don't understand because it comes back to bite you in the butt. When you're sitting there, $2 million, homegrown guy who's played well in the playoffs for you, understands your system, understands your fan base. The fans seem to love him, embrace the culture. Like, it's so rare. Not that Josh Jacobs isn't a phenomenal back. He is a phenomenal talent. But you had a guy who is both a great receiver, a great running back, fits your scheme, understands your quarterback, blocks well. And now he had 22 rushes for 93 yards against you, 4 receptions for 46 yards in his first. And he's doing Lambeau leaps with a Minnesota Vikings uniform on after the game. And don't be mad at him. He wanted to stay. And now his team is 4-0. You got a division rival that you just helped get better with a back you could have kept home. And that's one of those decisions I'm sure they'll look back on as a mistake.
Well, you talk about a good scheme fit and a good team fit. I mean, Aaron Jones was both of those things with the Green Bay Packers, and they let him walk. And we talked about it in our free agency recap midway through the offseason, Richard. We both were kind of shrugging like, okay, like you just said, Josh Jacobs, great player, bruiser, younger than Aaron Jones. I know Aaron Jones is a little beat up his last 2 years with the Packers, but how you can just let a guy like this walk out the door. And then you look at the other side, at Minnesota, all last year, they've got all these weapons, right? They go out and spend a high draft pick on Jordan Addison. They already got Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson's going to be coming off IR tier 2. But what they did not have last year is a running game. They relied heavily on Alexander Mattison. He wasn't the guy they thought he could be. And prior to that, they had Dalvin Cook, who we talked about off here, had his fumbling issues, had his injury issues, was one hit away from being out of every game, it seemed. And now they had a reliable veteran in Aaron Jones. And you got to sit back and wonder, man, you got a guy you can trust with the ball in his hands in the backfield in Aaron Jones. And then you got those wideouts. And now you just insert a game manager in Sam Darnold. The Vikings have been, objectively, I don't think there's much debate, the most dominant team in the NFL this year thus far. They've only trailed for less than 3.5 minutes all season, and they jumped out 28-0 on the road against the Pack. As a Lions fan, I'm nervous about this team because, like you said, they got Brian Flores. This defense stays humming. The Minnesota Vikings are a team to watch out for on a league scale, not just divisionally.
And this was a big game. But for all intents and purposes, this is a division game. You're in Green Bay. You're at Lambeau. Your team's 4-0 now. And now they got to continue. Now this is the standard. And they go to play a Jets team that's coming off a very tough loss. The defense has been playing really well. But a quarterback that was hit 14 times. So you talk about Brian Flores licking his chops and his defense licking their chops. They're going to continue. They're going to look at everything the Denver Broncos did, and they're going to do it again to the Jets. So this team could be looking at 5-0, and we're talking about a potential, like we have to start talking about number 1 seed in the playoffs as they continue to go through their schedule because they have favorable matchups.
They do. I want to move on here, Richard. We already kind of touched on it a little bit, but
we can't not touch on Xavier McKinney getting his 4th interception in 4 games. Mitchell leading the league, National Football League, in interceptions, and a lot of these are cover 2s. He just has such a great feel for the game, a great understanding, obviously great ball skills, and he's been one of their most underrated pickups this offseason.
No question. Xavier McKinney. The Giants should have never let him walk, but the Giants will continue to do Giants things. Right. Let's talk about another player that's just really taking the league by storm here. Jayden Daniels. And I know you touched on it briefly earlier, but the Washington Commanders are one of those teams, and we've talked about it the last couple of weeks. If Jayden Daniels can come in here and pull a CJ Stroud and elevate everyone around him, which it looks like he's doing, look out for the Washington Commanders. And I know you got a buddy on that defense, and Bobby Wagner leading the charge for this team defensively. They go on the road against Arizona Cardinals, who've been a tough matchup for every team they played this year, and they absolutely shellac them 42-14. Jayden Daniels goes 26 of 30, Richard, for 233 yards. I mean, this kid's a rookie. I mean, are you kidding me? 89% completion percentage the last 2 weeks. Is it safe to say the defensive or the rookie player of the year is wrapped up with Jayden Daniels?
Well, it's a long season, so let's not wrap up anything. Let's not give anybody that before it's due, but he's definitely in the lead, Mitchell. And he's done a great job earning that. Before they punted this game, they had 15 straight, with it continuing into this game, 15 straight scoring drives without a punt. They punted this game, and this is a rookie quarterback. I mean, it goes to the offensive coordinator and the job that he's doing. It goes to obviously Jayden Daniels' efficiency, 89% over the last 2 games, completion percentage. But the kid is just poised, and he's having a good time. He's dancing. He's running when he needs to. He's keeping his body out of trouble, out of harm's way. He's not taking a lot of hits. He was week 1. He took a couple week 1 that I kind of cringed at. I said, be careful. I mean, we saw with Anthony Richardson, him once again go out with an injury. Like last year, he went out with a season-ending injury. We're praying that it's not a season-ending hip injury this time, and maybe it's just a stinger or a hip pointer, and he'll be back next week. But it's a dangerous game. And as a mobile quarterback, you have to get yourself out of harm's way. You can run. You can be dynamic, get down or get out of bounds. And he's doing a great job of doing that. But let's talk about his arm, Mitchell, his decision-making. He had one pass that I know got away from him, end up being an interception in the ball game, which I'm sure he wants that one back. But for all intents and purposes, this kid has had great command. He looks a lot like CJ Stroud did last year, not to take anything away from what he's doing because he's his own man, but just making the game look really easy. And this is a hard game to play. It's definitely a hard game to quarterback. And we've seen that a number of times from other quarterbacks. He just seems like he's prepared for the moment. Dan Quinn, Bobby Wagner have this defense right where they need to be. Competing in these ball games. They held the Arizona Cardinals, and the Arizona Cardinals have had some up and down games where they scored a lot of points, they've not scored a lot of points, et cetera, et cetera. But they held this offense to 14 points, and they were able to get huge stops in this offense and run game. And Brian Robinson and these receivers, he's spreading the ball around. These veterans, Zach Ertz catching the passes. This is going to be a team that has a chance. Really has a chance to win this division because the other teams that you would think are favored and dominant, the Dallas Cowboys, incredibly talented team, are now really beat up and really just not looking like they're on track offensively to be dominant. And then you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, who just got beat pretty handily by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers without A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson. Just look vulnerable. And if you let this team get too many wins ahead, you're not going to be able to catch up. And if they can find a way to beat the Dallas Cowboys or to beat the Philadelphia Eagles once, maybe twice, Mitchell, we're talking about a changing of the guard because this quarterback isn't going anywhere.
And I like the changing of the guard call because I like this team in the division. I mean, you go on the road last week and beat the Cincinnati Bengals, who are desperate for a win on the road, Richard, and dominate that game for the most part. I know it got a little close late, but dude, I mean, the Washington Commanders had that game controlled for the bulk of that game. And then they go on the road again against a Cardinals team that is, again, another team that's desperate for a win, and they dominate. Jayden Daniels, I like the Washington Commanders. I like them in the division. They can take advantage because who knows what's going to happen with Micah Parsons, with Dexter Lawrence being out. The Cowboys could go on a little dry spell here too. And like you said, they did not look themselves at all on Thursday night. I know they walked away with a win, but your telecast, everyone, Tony Gonzalez said it best. I mean, this team just does not look like the Dallas Cowboys. And you see the Eagles reeling with injuries. I think this might be the Washington Commanders division. Richard, let's take it to Indianapolis. We saw Justin Fields. You know, he played decent, 22 of 34, 312 yards in a loss. You know, had one blunder there with the fumble. What are your thoughts if you're Mike Tomlin? You experience your first loss of the season. If Russell Wilson's back and ready to go next week, where's your mind at? Are you sticking with Justin Fields or are you moving over to Russell Wilson?
I think you have to play the hot hand. You can't risk, Russ trying to get up to speed. It's tough to come into the National Football League and play a game 4 or 5 games into the season because everybody else is up to speed. Everybody else is moving 5 games. They're in rhythm now. They're not, first couple games, you're rusty. You're knocking off rust. Coverages are knocking off rust. Players may have more bust. Offensive line is still trying to get some continuity. Defensive linemen are, trying to work out their moves. But 5 games in, teams are raring to go. And for Justin Fields to take the kind of step he did in the second half of this game, first half was still kind of rough. We can talk about the fumble, just a bad play where he should have just got rid of it and saved a bad play, but trying to do too much. But he could have folded right there. He could have went into the tube. He could have went into the hole. And at times last year with the Chicago Bears, he did. And, problems got compounded. But he showed a real growth in this game, 312 yards, 10 rushes for 55 yards, and 2 touchdowns. When he needed to use his legs, he did. And he didn't lean on them. He didn't say, man, I got to use my legs I'm scared to throw it. He threw it when he could. George Pickens hit him a number of times. Unfortunately, that was another play that hurt him. It was a George Pickens fumble in the red zone where he just hit him with a good pass. George Pickens trying to get more yards, fumbles, gives the ball back, and you lose a really close ball game where if you don't have that turnover, maybe you win that game. And this wasn't their defense's best performance. As I said before, they had been playing freaking world-class football the first couple games of the season. TJ Watt single-handedly pretty much winning games. They're scoring on defense. They're doing a lot of great things. This game, against the offense that you're not expecting a ton from, and a defense that's been statistically one of the worst in the National Football League, you thought this was a layup game, but there's no layups. There's no guarantees in the National Football League, as we continue to see. And in a game where they were struggling, and Flacco came in, a veteran quarterback who can just get the job done, hit the open guy, complete the easy passes, complete the layups, really gave them issues, and they needed Justin Fields to play over and beyond. And for a while, he did. He had a chance with 2 minutes to go at the end of the game to drive the ball down the field. Again, they had some mishaps, a missed snap, put him behind the 8 ball, could never recover and get back ahead of the sticks. But this has to be very, very encouraging if you're Mike Tomlin and you're just thinking about the development of Justin Fields and what he could be in the future. But who knows? I don't make the call. Maybe they play Russell Wilson next week and they say, hey, man, they didn't see enough from Justin Fields to continue, but it just wouldn't feel right. And I don't think the fans or the players would expect that.
You gotta love Joe Flacco just coming into this game and continuing his hot streak from last year. I mean, comes in late, salvages a Browns season, like really turns around his career, and then he comes in here, and it's like I bet the Steelers fans and coaching staff were probably wishing that Anthony Richardson was still in the game, because he goes 16 to 26, 168, 2 touchdowns, pushing the ball all over the place, getting Josh Downs involved, who really hasn't done anything all season. It goes to show you, when you have a quarterback that can distribute the football and you got weapons like the Colts have, Joe Flacco might have just found himself another home, Richard. Who knows how long Anthony Richardson's out, but Flacco continues doing Flacco things. Let's take it to Chicago. Chicago gets a much needed win. Caleb Williams has arguably his best game as a pro, 17 to 23 for 157 and a touchdown. But Richard, what are your thoughts on him thus far? Because you're not seeing the same fanfare that you see with Jayden Daniels. You see with Jayden Daniels, you see, hey, this guy's going to be a superstar. I don't know if I feel the same way about Caleb Williams just yet. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, just give him credit. It's hard to win in this league, and this defense has given him a lot of chances to win. They're keeping him in the game. They're playing great football. Jaquan Brisker could have had 2 interceptions in this game. One of them, he stepped out of bounds, leading to a field goal for the Rams, but got the game-sealing interception at the end. I just saw Caleb Williams miss a few passes that you expect an NFL quarterback to make, and he's young. And he did get sacked 3 times, and I've been very tough on the offensive line of the Chicago Bears, and they did a much better job in this game. They did a much better job in this game, opening holes up for DeAndre Swift to get through. He had a number of big runs that helped him, and that's again the best friend of a young quarterback is a run game and your defense, and take pressure off of him so that he can develop and he can miss a few throws, and then maybe he start to learn within the game and win and hit those throws later on. And he end up hitting DJ Moore for a touchdown late in the game, a really good pass, but he missed on a few, and he benefited from a defensive PI on Tre'Davious White when he was guarding Keenan Allen, got it to the 1-yard line. They run it in. So you appreciate his development, and him being more efficient, caring about the ball. But those sacks, a lot of those sacks were him holding the ball too long. Things he has to learn. You got to speed up your process. Understand when it collapses, you don't have more than 4 or 5 seconds to get that ball out of there. Don't always try to play hero ball. There were times he got out the pocket. He looked like he did in college, that quick flick of the wrist that everybody's falling in love with, that Patrick Mahomes-like movement. But when you're in that pocket and it's collapsing and you're saying, hey, sometimes you just got to say, hey, we don't got it this play. Let it go, and that would avoid some of those sacks. And some offensive linemen, would say those should be counted differently, because offensive linemen say get rid of the football, and quarterbacks say hold on to the football because I want to protect my efficiency. But the sacks fall off on the offensive line. So if you throw it away, it's an incompletion, but it's not a sack on the offensive line. But if you hold it, it's a sack on the offensive line, but it's not an incompletion. So it's not necessarily a negative play on the quarterback stat sheet. So he has to find a way to get that ball out. But congratulations to him, another win. And it's hard to win in this league.
We got a big game tomorrow night, and you're wearing the Seattle Seahawks cap, and I'm going to be at the game, Richard. The Detroit Lions take on your Seattle Seahawks. Let's talk about this game real quick. I need a little prediction from you. I mean, where's your head at with this game? Do you believe that the Seattle Seahawks can go on the road again and spoil the Monday night for the Detroit Lions?
Well, I'll say this, and I always like to lead with facts and things that make sense.
Okay, I do.
The Seattle Seahawks have not necessarily played the greatest defense the last few years, and that's statistically speaking, and still found a way to battle in those games. They have a new look. They're playing some of their best football. You talk about Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen playing, honestly, really lockdown defense within McDonald's scheme. Boye Mafe, who's not playing this game, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, all out for this game. But other guys have stepped up and made tremendous impact. And I think schematically, Mike McDonald puts a lot of pressure on himself to make things right. And the Detroit Lions, when facing this scheme against Baltimore last year, did not fare well. I think it was 38-6 or something along those lines.
They got smoked.
So it's a lot of those things that lead me to believe that Mike McDonald has answers for what Ben Johnson was trying to do last year. Maybe Ben Johnson makes an adjustment. Maybe Jared Goff plays better. Maybe this offensive line just says, hey, screw it. We're just going to play bully ball and we run it down your throats the entire game. Who knows? But, Tyrell Dotson has stepped up and played a great role in his defense. Jaron Reed's going to have a phenomenal game. I believe this will be a breakout game for him. Derek Hall, who's been really a menace as an outside linebacker / DN, whatever you want to label him. But anything can happen. Detroit is an incredible team, especially at home. Jared Goff is playing good football, but if they start to get to Jared early, you know how that goes.
I do. Detroit needs to go out there and prove themselves again. I mean, even that Arizona game, they put 20 points on the board in the first half and didn't score the rest of the game. They need to come out and be a little bit more consistent. Sam Laporta is a little dinged up, but they got to get him more involved, Richard. For me, I need to see the Lions score 30-plus points this week to feel a little calm because their defense has looked good, but offensively they haven't showcased their same skill set as they did last year. So I'm hoping and praying, but I got the Lions winning 31-21 tomorrow. That's my take on it. I need a little score. Give me a score prediction, Richard, before we wrap.
Score prediction, Mitchell, 24-17. The Seattle Seahawks pull away with the victory. My wild card in this, Mitchell, is that defensive line of Detroit's versus the offensive line of Seattle Seahawks. That can be the oil in all this party. That can be the thing that ruins this day for Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, JSN, Tyler Lockett, and the boys. K9 supposedly playing this game. He's healthy for the first time in a couple weeks. That'll be a boost that this offense needs. But if they cannot protect Geno Smith, if Aiden Hutchinson continues to go off in the way he has as the league leader in sacks, then that changes the whole equation because you got to be able to protect the quarterback. When Geno's kept clean, he's very tough to deal with.
Richard, I will let you sign us off as we conclude. I mean, shoot, we're already through week 4. This is time flies. Sign us off.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us. We appreciate you. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We'll have another special guest on the next episode of the Richard Sherman podcast. Please stay tuned.